Hello, everybody. My name is Michael, and welcome back to Last to First. So it is the Mexico City Grand Prix race review time. Not the best race we've ever seen, but there are certainly plenty of talking points to go into, as per usual. So let's get into it. Perez's disaster home race. First off, I need to state a formal apology to Sergio Perez and the entire country of Mexico, as I completely called his disastrous weekend, and I kind of feel bad for completely jinxing him like that, but that is the name of the game. And yeah, of course, I'm talking about the first lap incident with Perez turning in on Charles Leclerc and knocking himself out of the race on the first lap. I certainly feel for Checo. That's a really not ideal thing. Very sad for him to have to do that in front of his home crowd, but you make a mistake and you make a mistake. These are the things that happen. But yeah, he had an incredible run on at the start of the race there, and he was just getting the biggest toe of his entire life from Verstappen, and made a risky move on the outside of turn one, and he just decided to turn in a little too early. I can certainly appreciate that he wanted to really go for the win and be aggressive with it, but it was just a clumsy mistake that he made. He very much knew that Verstappen was on the inside of Leclerc because he was getting the toe from him, so he knew they were going three wide in there, and he just turned on him too much, flew several feet up in the air. It was actually pretty crazy how far up he got. It must have been quite the thud when he came back down. But you could certainly see his emotions in the car as well as in the garage and afterwards. I mean, he was just completely gutted, as you would imagine, and it was definitely sad to see, but mistakes are mistakes, and yeah, that's not looking good for Perez, especially after Ricciardo's great weekend as well. But yeah, this weekend only has continued to refuel any rumors of Perez's seat. I don't think they ever completely died down, but he had a calmer weekend at the USGP. And after this, I mean, that completely lit up the flame even more, just threw gasoline on the fire completely. But, you know, with Ricciardo having that great race, doesn't look too good for Perez when he had such a disastrous weekend, and then Ricciardo outqualified him, as well as continued that with a strong race, and probably would have even done better had it not been for the red flag. But not only is the pressure mounting from Ricciardo for Perez, but now just today I've been on Twitter, and there are rumors of Alonso going to Red Bull next year. I was really surprised to see that. I can't particularly imagine that happening. I don't really see it happening. But boy, oh boy, would that make for quite the spicy title fight next year. I mean, that would end up in absolute flames, chaos, disaster, crashes. Two of the most aggressive drivers in Formula One right now, and maybe ever, Verstappen and Alonso going head to head. I mean, that would be crazy. If Red Bull has the same advantage as they do this year, if they had it next year as well, then I think the title fight would be okay if there was a Verstappen and Alonso pairing there. But if Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, if any of these teams are a little closer, snatching a couple wins, I mean, a Verstappen and Alonso duo could take a lot of points away from each other and could open the doors for other possibilities for other teams. But we can only dream and have a good laugh at all of the rumors that exist. Certainly, F1 Twitter is a crazy space out there. But back to Sergio Perez in particular, yeah, it's just unfortunate for him. Red Bull clearly wants to keep Checo. That's the easiest option for them. He has performed well, and they know, and we know that he can perform well. But if he finishes the year poorly, like he is and has continued, and especially if Hamilton were to beat him for P2 in the Constructors' Championship, then I don't think it's looking good for Perez at all. I think I could see a switch happening sooner rather than later. But yeah, if he loses out to Hamilton for P2 in the championship, that shows that he is a real true liability for Red Bull, because the battle for P2 should not be existent at all. It's only down to Perez's lack of pace and his mistakes that it's even existent. And if it wasn't for Hamilton getting disqualified at the USGP, as well as numerous other problems that Hamilton and Mercedes have had this year, I think Hamilton could be in P2 already as is. So Perez is a bit lucky, but he really needs to hold on to that if he wants to hold on to his seat going forward, I think. The Honey Badger is back. The Honey Badger has appeared to officially made a return, and boy, it is good to see. I think everybody is happy to see such a great performance from Ricciardo. He seems like he's really back to his old self, and he says that he feels back to his old self as well. We'll see if he can maintain that over the next couple of races, because it's one thing to have one really good race on a track that suits the car, and it's another thing to sustain that for multiple races. So it will be interesting to see. But yeah, he had a stunning qualifying to start P4. It was super impressive. I don't think anybody thought that he would be on the second row of the grid. And then to top it off, he outqualified Perez in the Red Bull, which is bonkers McGee's. I mean, that's its own storyline right there. Say nothing about Perez crashing out of the race. And then Ricciardo was only just about a tenth of a second off of Verstappen as well for qualifying. So super awesome pace from Ricciardo in the AlphaTauri. And, as we were going through qualifying, I was wondering if Ricciardo would be able to maintain that pace, because in Q1 and Q2 he was getting quite the hefty tow from Tsunoda, since he was going to be starting from the pit lane. But when Tsunoda wasn't in Q3 and he didn't have the tow, he still showed up and made quite the incredible lap there. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see that. But really awesome qualifying from Ricciardo. The amount of pressure that Ricciardo is putting on Perez at the moment is hard to imagine. That's just to have such a great performance like that, and Perez to have such a bad performance. I can only imagine what Checo is feeling right now, what's going through his head, and who knows, maybe his fate has already been sealed. We don't really know with all the rumors spreading around, but of course they are just rumors as per usual. But yeah, Ricciardo, he had the great qualifying, and then he followed it up with maybe even an even better race. He maintained really strong pace and really impressed a lot of people. He was even battling Russell at the end of the race there, which we did not see thanks to the TV directors. Don't get me started on the TV directors. They should be fired immediately after that craziness. Just completely cutting away from a battle is just insane, unacceptable, and they missed so much more throughout the race, and they missed stuff every single race. It's quite brutal. But anyways, what was Russell up to? I mean, he was lost this weekend. He was once again far behind Hamilton, and for Ricciardo to be battling Russell was pretty insane, both for Ricciardo to be that impressive and Russell to be that impressively rough around the edges this weekend. But Russell is single-handedly trying to lose Mercedes P2 in the Constructors, because he keeps finishing behind the Ferraris, and luckily for him, Hamilton is finishing ahead of them with P2 and some great races as of late. But Russell really needs to get his act together, both for his own self, for his long-term future, as well as for Mercedes' fight in P2 in the championship. But going back to Ricciardo's race, it looked like he was going to be right up there in 5th, 6th, maybe 7th in that range. He had genuine pace and was genuinely able to keep the cars behind him. Then the red flag came out and about halfway through the race, and unfortunately that didn't help Ricciardo. He lost a couple positions because of that, but he still wound up P7, almost P6 very nearly, and got a great haul of points for the AlphaTauri team with Tsunoda's crazy mishap, which I'll get into later, and Ricciardo's great performance. Quite the contrasting performances there, but Ricciardo single-handedly in that race brought AlphaTauri up to 8th in the championship, and yeah, great performance from him. Some much-needed money for AlphaTauri in the constructors' race. So we'll see what happens in the final few races. Can they knock on Williams' door, or will they be able to stay in 8th, or will they go back down in order since they're level with Alfa Romeo right now? We shall see. Magnussen red flag. Now, speaking on the red flag caused by Kevin Magnussen, quite the massive shunt from Magnussen. We saw when it cut to him on the TV, the car was really completely destroyed, and thankfully he was okay. As soon as we saw it on the live feed, he was already getting out of the car, but he looked a little shaken up and looked like he may have held onto the steering wheel or something when he crashed, because he was shaking around his wrists, kind of like Ricciardo was when he broke his wrist. But I don't think there was any long-term problems for Magnussen with that. I'm sure he just got shaken up. But yeah, quite the massive crash for him in a weird part of the track, and that was due to some suspension failure on the Haas that caused him to just completely veer off mid-corner and just spear into a wall. And quite the massive shunt. But thankfully, he was all okay. Unfortunately, for the interest of the race, the red flag didn't really come at an opportune time, because most of the front runners and most of the drivers in particular, or throughout the grid, had already pitted. So it really didn't allow it to spice things up too much. Unfortunately, it just hurt some drivers like Ricciardo, and then it did benefit a couple other drivers down the order, but I just can't remember who in particular that it was decent for. But yeah, had probably 15 or 20 minutes of waiting for the barriers to get repaired, and then there was another standing start, which I think everybody was super excited for and nervous for, given the first start with Perez, and generally there's always a lot of risk involved in a standing start, especially in turn 1 at Mexico, because it is so tight through turns 1, 2, and 3. However, there was not any amount of chaos, unfortunately, on the standing start. It was all pretty chill. There was some good battles a little further back in the order, like Ricciardo trying to make his move on Russell, and some real close racing throughout there. But Hamilton wasn't able to take advantage of his softer tires. He was on the mediums compared to Verstappen and the Ferraris on the hards, and he just didn't get away good enough. He almost got swallowed up by Sainz as well. And then Verstappen just had the perfect getaway on the hard tires somehow. He just completely flew off like a rocket ship, and he was not challenged at all. So that kind of led to the rest of the race being status quo for him. But yeah, I haven't touched on it much with Verstappen there, but obviously another great performance from him. 16 wins in a season, the most ever, breaking his previous record of 15. What's to stop him from getting a few more? Not much. It's going to be tough. Mercedes typically has done well in Brazil, so we'll see. But yeah, super impressive from him. He had complete control over the race, a ton of race pace, and Hamilton in P2, or Charles Leclerc starting from pole, just had nothing to fight him with, unfortunately. But congrats to Verstappen, 51 wins, 16 wins this season alone. Pretty insane what he's doing right now. Lando Norris. That's it. Lando Norris, everybody. Got to give him a round of applause, because what a race from him. It was so unfortunate that he wound up qualifying so poorly on Saturday, because, man, his race pace, race craft, strategy, everything was just so great throughout the race. He was just on another level today, but He started, I believe, P17 from qualifying, and after some of the other cars had to start from the pit lane or have engine penalties and whatnot. But throughout the race, the beginning of the race was pretty chill. He climbed up to P10 after starting on the softs, which was an interesting choice. I think a lot of people were worried about that after seeing the high degradation of the softs in qualifying and throughout the weekend, but he pulled it off and quietly snuck up to P10 before the red flag came. And on the standing start, he lost several places and went back down the order, which was unfortunate for him, but he got pinched between a couple cars and he had to back out pretty heavily to not crash. Nobody's fault or anything. The space just ran out, so he had to make the smart call to kind of back out of any potential moves and caused them to lose a couple places. But I think that lit a fire in his belly because he was on fire for the rest of the race. Particularly his last stint was just insanely impressive with his pace and his tire management. I felt like he was just pushing the entire race and was just on another level there. Seemed like nobody else had any answers for him, and he was just passing cars left and right. I mean, who would have known? Who knows what would have happened had he qualified better? I think he definitely would have been on the podium. Just a matter of where he would have finished on the podium. I don't think he would have got Verstappen. However, I think there's every chance that he may have been able to get Hamilton in P2. But unfortunately, we will not know because of his unfortunate qualifying on Saturday. But nonetheless, really great race on Sunday for Norris. He was really the only entertainment value of the race because of how many overtakes he was having throughout the entire race, just constantly trying to crawl back after starting behind and then losing some places and then going back again. But that at least helped some entertainment value for what we saw anyways. Shout out to the TV directors. But yeah, it still wasn't a good race, I wouldn't say. Pretty lackluster, but without him, it would have been even more dull. So shout out to Norris for that. I really wonder if the McLarens had a better cooling package this weekend. I don't know if any of you guys have heard anything about it, but I didn't hear them talk too much about the temperatures or having any problems with cooling, and I didn't really see them having any problems with cooling, like getting out of the way of cars in front with the hot air coming back. It just seemed like Norris was able to just push hard for seemingly the entire race and just was not having any issues like the other cars were. Particularly the Ferraris had to really manage their pace, doing a ton of lifting and coasting to cool down the engines. So I don't know, definitely interesting, but I think that may have been a strong case for why Norris had such a strong race. But I don't know. Let me know if you guys know anything about that. But on the other side of the garage for McLaren, got to speak on Piastri for a moment. He had another really lackluster performance this weekend, and he was really nowhere again in the race. It was been pretty weird to see this downturn in form for Piastri, and quite unfortunate to see so far. But for Norris to still beat him shows, after starting from near last, shows how not on the pace Piastri was and just how impressive Norris was during the race, as well as just his recent form has been on another level. Hoping to see Piastri make some better improvements throughout the rest of the season. I think he definitely needs it after showing such strong pace and form up until like the US GP or so. But I'm sure he will turn it back on. It was another higher degradation race, so maybe that was the case, but definitely something that he needs to sort out. But I think he will. He is a very quick, strong driver, and I know we'll see him challenging Norris again in the near future. Tsunoda copies Perez. Yuki. My goodness. Apparently, Sergio Perez is his idol because he decided to copy exactly what Perez did in turn one and ruin his race as well. It was pretty shocking to see, super unfortunate, but Sonoda really ruined a great result for the team. Could have been a double point score for the team, and unfortunately he threw that away by copying Perez and just turning into Piastri in the first corner. He seemed like he kind of drove kind of erratically. He didn't need to turn in. He didn't need to move under braking a little bit that I believe he did, and then just turn completely too early in on Piastri. Piastri was just a passenger in that, and that ruined Sonoda's race. Really disastrous mistake by Sonoda. It would have been huge points for the team, as well as just the continued pressure on him with Ricciardo outperforming him. It definitely is not going to help his cases for a future race seat down the line. But up until that moment, he was having a really incredible drive. He was last after having, I believe, engine swap that he needed to have, and yeah, he was really crawling back. For him to get to points in an AlphaTauri from last was super impressive, and there was times where maybe we even thought that he was going to beat Ricciardo, which would have been insane in more ways than one. But alas, just like Perez, everything can go well up until you make a mistake, and that ruined his race and ruined the team's chances of getting some extra points. So not a mistake that should be happening from Tsunoda, who is several years into his Formula One career. But yeah, mistakes were made. My predictions versus the actual results. Lastly, going into my predictions versus the actual results. Now, I had some interesting predictions this weekend, and some of them came weirdly crazy true, and I'm sorry for that. And other ones were not so true, unfortunately. But for qualifying, I predicted that it would be Verstappen P1, Hamilton P2, Leclerc P3. And to everybody's surprise, ended up being Leclerc in P1, Sainz in P2, and Verstappen in P3. I don't know where the Ferraris pulled that out of the bag, but it was very shocking and surprising. And another pole for Leclerc, and another loss for him to Verstappen after starting from pole. Very unfortunate for him. The stat line continues, but really no fault of his own because the Ferrari just didn't have the pace. The Mercedes were down in, I think, like 5th and 6th, or 6th and 7th? 6th and 8th, sorry. After Perez outqualified them, as well as Ricciardo outqualifying them. So that was pretty crazy and unexpected. But yeah, the Mercedes just didn't have the pace in qualifying that I thought that they would at the end, but Hamilton still made up for it with a great result in P2. But going on to the race, my predictions were Hamilton, Norris, and Leclerc. And the actual, of course, was P1 Verstappen, P2 Hamilton, P3 Leclerc. So I really felt it in my guts that there was going to be some reliability problem for Verstappen after he had the braking issues in Austin. I really thought now was the time for Hamilton to finally win 2 years on from his last victory, nearly 2 years on, and for Verstappen to have a true reliability problem. But unfortunately for us non-Verstappen fans, or for everybody who wants a good race in general, he did not have any reliability problems. He was bulletproof, performed outstanding, and not much more to say about him. But yeah, in addition with predicting Norris in P2, that went out the window as soon as his qualifying was over in Q1. So that was quite unfortunate. I thought my predictions for the whole weekend were going to be entirely wrong as per usual. But of course, I had some good predictions at the end. But yeah, had Norris started a bit higher up after qualifying, I think he definitely would have been on the podium and it would have been a good shout. And I was correct with Leclerc getting P3 in the podium. And so at least had a couple drivers on there that was correct, just maybe in slightly different orders. Next up, my masterclass of the weekend. I had predicted Lewis Hamilton because I thought he was going to win, and I wanted to double down on that. And I don't think I'd be wrong to say he was the masterclass. I think he certainly had a great weekend, another great result here in Mexico. However, there were several other drivers that could easily have been the masterclass, and maybe they were better. So let me know what you guys think, who was the driver of the weekend. But yeah, it could have been Verstappen, just outstanding all weekend, brought home the win. Wasn't much of a challenge from other drivers, but you can't blame him for that. Of course, Ricciardo, an insane comeback weekend, which was nice to see. And then obviously Norris as well could have been the masterclass. Maybe less so him because of his qualifying performance, but certainly can't take away his performance in the race. For my last two predictions for the disaster class of the weekend and the bold prediction, I want to apologize again because I was spot on with the predictions. And while I do enjoy being right with my predictions, I do feel bad for how disastrously it did go for my prediction of Sergio Perez. And yeah, sad days for him. He actually had a decent qualifying and looked like he was going to rip apart my predictions to shreds. But that clearly went very well for him in the race. He did get out qualified by Ricciardo, of course. So that certainly didn't look good, but he still had a very clean qualifying. He was only like a tenth and a half or 2/10 off of Verstappen, which is where he really needs to be. And it doesn't happen too often that he was that close, but he still got out qualified by Ricciardo. So that didn't look good. But then, of course, lap one of the race, makes a mistake, turns in on Leclerc, misjudges it, just really clumsy, and wipes himself out of the race. So yeah, brutal for him. And I saw that, and I was shocked for him and shocked for how accurate my predictions would be, because I thought that he would get into some type of tangle and that he might crash out or get some heavy damage. And he did both of those things, crashed out, had to DNF, and I also predicted he wouldn't score a single point, and he did not score a single point after that. So sad days for him, but that means the fight for P2 is back on. It's only 20 points difference. If Perez continues to have some struggles and Hamilton is on the run of form he has, it's very possible. There's only 3 races left with a sprint race. Hamilton is certainly very good in Brazil, and the Red Bulls weren't the best last year in Brazil. So there's all the chance in the world that Hamilton could continue to take some points away from Perez in P2 in the championship. So we'll see. That's going to be interesting. The other titles, the titles have been completely wrapped up, of course. So this is our last bit of entertainment for the last few races. But we'll see what happens with that. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to my Mexico City Grand Prix race review. We are going to be back so soon again with the Brazilian GP next weekend, the last of 3 races of the triple header, and then we're off to Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi. Hope we can have a few strong races to finish out the weekend, but I'm excited to continue making podcasts and videos about Formula One. I love this, and I don't want the season to end. Got to come up with some stuff to do over the winter break before the season begins again, but don't worry, I have some ideas coming, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one.